We are recording on Thursday, February 13th, 2025 at 11:03 a.m. Eastern Time. And for everybody listening, for our first of all, so Gray, you haven't been on here before. This is the first time, hopefully first of many. If guys are listening, please go in the description. Please go follow him on Twitter. Um, and then there's a new sponsor of the show, and I met with a producer guy yesterday, and he tried to walk me through how to put like the logo on OBS, and I'm functionally retarded. So to them, I apologize. I will get it up on there. I don't know, but I know it's Untamed Media. So guys, the new show, the new sponsor of the show that's keeping the show going is Untamed. It's going to be in the description. I literally have a sticky note. I'm just too stupid to get the logo up on the screen. So that's my apologies. But somebody, I mean, as with most good shows, somebody randomly messages me on like Twitter or Instagram, and they're like, "Have this dude on," and I just, all right, yeah, sure, and and then whatever happens from there happens. So you and I have spoken briefly online, kind of about all things around MK Ultra, Monarch. I read that book in one of your posts, Spies for Hire, and just about like how I don't think as a conspiracy guy, I don't think even I realized just how unimaginably deep the rabbit hole goes. And I'm normally one telling people, I'm like, the rabbit hole goes deep. And then you start reading about like the psychological manipulation. You're like, Jesus Christ. And so I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna hand it over to you. I'm gonna post the live link. But yeah, man, you take it away.
That's what's up. I appreciate you. So I mean, a lot of people have heard of MK Ultra,
Yeah.
right? Which is just, was a giant research umbrella that went into behavioral modification. And we're talking about also how substances affect people, soft blanketing from like, 5 hertz being blanketed on populace to make them depressed, right? Hidden embassies with 5 hertz, 10 hertz that's played in areas like mega churches to make people more receptive. But then all the way down to like Manchurian candidate level, like
Yeah.
programming of of like a robot person, right? I mean, it gets incredibly elaborate, right? So Monarch is kind of like the operational machine that this was turned into, okay? And Monarch, it's a self-replicating machine. Look at it kind of like a gestalt. You have all these compartments, right? That work independently and they may not even know about each other, but they come together working in an organized fashion that together is more than the sum as a whole. It's a gestalt,
Hmm.
right? And it's a self-replicating machine. It uses family dynasties and breeding, right? Kind of like the way they ping pong sensitive operations between government and then, non-government organizations, to kind of escape Freedom of Information Act, right? In order to, skirt oversight, basically, so they can just really do what they do. So, you read this book, Spies for Hire. I haven't even read the whole book, but essentially, what really gets happening here is like, say you got your clandestine services, stuff like this. This isn't just like people going, into official operations and like, they're like, okay, do this, do this. You have the OGs that have long been doing this and have their
Hmm.
own network, that are really running things.
Off the books. This isn't a welcome to the psychological department. This is the all right, we've had these networks in Fox News since 1971. These ones have been in Facebook since yeah, and this is what we're
Exactly.
doing. Yeah.
They've long been cultivating different networks and media in here and there. So Monarch is really an umbrella like MK Ultra was, and what it covers is a wide range, all hardcore frequency weaponry, whether it be microwave, whether it be, just very, microwave to, hurt people, to, fry their brain, or whether it be like the fine tuned, really adjusting behavioral modification. It also covers, some of these advanced physics, some of this advanced craft, and some of the like foremost classified programs going into nuclear. And then the same territory of nuclear is also covered with like really sensitive, weapons of mass destruction level things.
Mm.
So here's what people need to understand first and foremost. When you have these very sensitive projects like UAP related stuff and all this is coming out, People say, oh, well, how is this kept quiet so long? How is it? Well, one, it's not completely, shit gets out there and it gets tamped down. If information gets out and they can't steer it, they'll at least flood a bunch of bullshit in there. So you just, don't know which way you're looking, right?
Hmm.
Um, but the thing is that personnel in these sensitive programs, tend to be generational. A lot of politicians tend to be generational. You get high up here in military intelligence and different areas, it's a lot of generational stuff going on. And they try to keep this compartmented because, it's one thing to leave like an agency, right, or a job, but it's another thing when you have blood ties and like, especially if you want to speak out about some bullshit going on.
Yeah.
So the thing is, there is a spectrum of behavioral modification. And Monarch is covering all these sensitive areas of behavioral modification, of frequency weapon, and these advanced projects, these deep black projects. And personnel go through mandatory conditioning. The mass majority of them are unwitting. Now, that conditioning happens on a spectrum. There will be a lot of techniques that are applied covertly through selection processes, through conditioning and training. A lot of stuff happening at the head doctor, which they might not even understand, right? It's a stair step, it's a pyramid of access and knowledge to this. But there is conditioning applied to keep people silent and compliant. We're not just rolling the dice and betting that, our nuclear physicists' wives aren't going to cheat on them and they're going to get pissed and disillusioned and run their fucking mouth. No, there's conditioning applied, and it goes extremely deep to the point where with some of these like psychotronic weapons, nowadays they'll remotely stimulate the temporal lobe, the awareness area in the brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which the awareness area is like speech and
Hmm.
linguistics. The temporal lobe kind of like can make something feel significant and important and kind of like stimulate that acceptance part of the brain. And, they'll insert post-hypnotic suggestions. If you talk about these classified projects, you will fucking kill yourself type of shit. Like
Yeah.
really, really sinister stuff. But, mandatory when you're getting to national security. This isn't left up to chance.
No.
Now, so
And what?
you have
And of
this.
course it wouldn't. And sorry to interrupt. Yeah. No, that's one thing I
Oh,
was
no,
thinking
yeah.
of. I'm like, these people are evil, but they're not stupid.
Yeah, and I mean, even with like mandatory stuff, if I have the most sensitive projects and we're working on, and we're worried about other nation states or whatever, like we got to make sure these fucking people don't talk. And then what do you have
Of
people watching them?
course.
Who's watching the people that are watching the people that are watching the people? Like where does the buck stop?
I think Bob Lazar said that about Area 51 is that he's like, there was security for the security.
Yeah,
Why
yeah,
wouldn't
and
there be? Why wouldn't there be?
well, really, what are you doing? What would you do if you have virtually unlimited resources and you need to keep a lid on this shit? Especially if you've crossed the line some areas,
Well, if you have virtually unlimited
Come here.
resources and you're using it to maintain your place of power and to continue to have unlimited resources, as well as, not be executed for the demon that you are, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're probably going to do just about anything to
Yeah.
maintain that power.
So, so what's going on is you have this soft conditioning behavioral modification applied to personnel in these sensitive areas. It's mandatory. In order to get up to this level in these sensitive projects, it has to be done. If they don't have the right, if they're not conducive to it, one aspect of this is being highly suggestible, which actually 30% of the population is highly suggestible. The other element to this is having dissociative ability. Now that's a hereditary trait, okay, and that can get passed down, and that's most desirable for this. One of the reasons this shit's called Monarch, and that's an overused term at this point, and
Hmm.
again, it's an umbrella. But Monarch, the butterflies have a migratory pattern, and it takes about 5 generations for some of them, like Mexico to New York. They have a few different areas they go, but they pass down that migratory pattern information genetically to their offspring. And that's one of the reasons it was called Monarch. It goes into a bunch of occultist shit,
Hmm.
but keeping it just simple and light for now. So you have this soft conditioning that's applied to people to keep them silent and compliant. But then there's a spectrum to where there's actually like Manchurian candidate level. And we're not talking about a one-time throwaway patsy Manchurian candidate. No, we're talking about deeply embedded in clandestine services, that are ran by OGs that are linked up with some of these age-old societies and globalists, the globalist elites, okay? You know, they have systematically made industrialized process to keep this machine going, okay? And, you know, a lot of this, they have nets set up and they have funnels set up everywhere. So under NDEA and DODEA, which is National Defense Education Act, and the Department of Defense Education Act, through this, you know, supplies the funding and, you know, has a lot of grants that they give in order to things like Talent. Okay, Project Talent was made by John C. Flanagan, who was an World War II aviation psychologist. He selected the combat fighter pilots according to aptitude. You know, goes into Gettinger with the personality assessment system and the testing. Goes into, you know, Wechsler, which is IQ tests that even go down to as young as children as 2, where some of these daycares, in order to get their funding, they actually have to apply these tests and report on it as like a part of, you know, the whole deal. Like it's embedded in. So you have Project Talent, you have third parties like the Finders is one that was extreme in
That was the
using
huge
it,
one. The back in
right?
that's in Nick Bryant's the Franklin
The
scandal. Yeah,
Franklin scandal, which
that was
ties
the
into
most fucked
this.
one that I've ever
That
read.
was the most fucked one, exactly. And it was a little bit extreme when there's a lot not as extreme that might be a little bit more digestible.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like you have one called The Associates. There's very obscure names here, right? But what happens is people get selected through talent, whatnot. And there's a few categories. You get selected through talent, which is a lifelong monitoring system for people with different capabilities. But you got your gifted and talented educations, you know, whether at GATE or a regional equivalent core, you know, back in the day, MGM, TAG, whatever they call it. You know, you got high cap, you got all sorts of stuff in different areas. So you have your gifted and talented educations, your pull-out enrichments. Then you have your special needs, you know, vocational speech therapy, things like this. And then you have your disciplinary and correctional things, which can even go into ROTC and stuff like that. But so you have a few different categories, whether you have gifted and talented, you know, whether you have lower class, some of this is embedded into foster care systems and specific third parties are enabled. You know, whether you have it in pre-existing Ivy League institutions for the upper class. You know, the disciplinary catches people and special needs catches people from all classes. But middle class tends to be GATE and all that. High class already established it, Ivy Leagues. And then, you know, the lower class tends to, you know, go through foster homes and certain state daycares and things like this. You know, not even, again, back to Nick Bryant and the Franklin scandal, you have the Presidio, you know, fiasco and all that, right? So what's happening here is they have industrialized this. And when MK Ultra blew and you had your church committee and like
Yeah.
leading up to 77, right?
Yeah,
In
was it the
77,
Family Jewels? Was that the fucking file they called it? Was it the Family Jewels?
that was, I believe they did call
Church
something the
committee. That's the whole. Everyone knows the heart attack gun. That's the famous picture. It's from that
yeah,
shit.
the heart attack gun and then behavioral modification and all that. So by the time that blew, they already had Monarch fully operationalized and
Yeah.
layered off plausible deniability, right? Instead of saying, hey, let's set these kids through this military daycare, you know, they're basically already had people selected, a lot already generational, and, you know, you're branching this off. You know, some of these, they have, you know, like motorcycle clubs, a lot of crossover with military intelligence to say, hey, you know, this kid, you know, comes from a broken home. Y'all watch out for him, put them through the paces. You know, they might, you know, raise them up, teach them a few things, you know, bring them by the dojo, blah, 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 whatever it is, you know, kind of putting them through certain paces, you know, grooming in a way, you know, in completely unwitting manner. They might even be unwitting, but they're obviously going to pass on some of their applicable knowledge. Street gangs are another thing. And if you go back to some of these street gangs, such as like Vice Lords, right, and even like Folk and stuff like this, you know, a lot of this is created in Chicago from a juvenile correctional facility that was running behavioral modification programs linked up with MK Ultra. That was the basis of some of these. And it has the same occult path working pyramidal hierarchy structure to where you go through rites and rituals, heart checks, tests and trials, to kind of break you down and build you up into something. That's what all this is about, is affecting development, behavioral modification and development. So you have this going on from street gangs, you have this going on, some people from the motorcycle clubs get in it, again, daycares, blah, blah, blah. So you really have a catch-all. These family dynasties, these elite people are already sending their people to the same schools and institutions that are known to be very strict, and so on and so forth. And they get this early conditioning. Trauma is involved because trauma elicits dissociation.
Mm-hmm.
Dissociation equals compartments.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're looking for, compartmentalized, okay? So the thing here is, eventually some of these people will get routed, whether going to this line of work, that line of work, we'll say a nuclear physicist or something like this, going through STEM, AP, all this. They'll get some of this conditioning applied. Are they a full-bore Manchurian candidate? Most of them are not, but many are. And the people that get this full-bore Manchurian candidate type programming tend to all be in the clandestine services. This is one of the dirtiest secrets that's really going on when you get to espionage and counter-espionage, is the fact that in these human operations, these HCS, human control systems, they're fleet managing assets. And a lot of these people are, in fact, mind controlled. So what's happening is, say you go into, whether you officially are in clandestine services, or a lot of these people just go through this actually programming, and they might end up a school teacher. They might end up, a musician. They might end up on the silver screen, an actor, whatever it is. The Monarch is breeding and placement. So it's generating these assets and making sure that they keep on self-generating, and then it's affecting the placement. Just like monarchs rule a territory, okay? Monarchs are...
My thoughts are going crazy. I had to write down some.
Yeah,
Sometimes when
no,
I
what
do
you
a
got?
show and I have a bunch of
I
different
talk
thoughts I don't want to
fast, so if
forget.
you...
No. It's just, when I have a bunch of different thoughts that I don't want to forget, I put them down. So I'm still listening.
Oh,
Keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. No, okay. So anyways, it's breeding and placement. So you have all walks of life. You have some of these people in it, and getting past the passive conditioning, the soft conditioning that's just applied to personnel in sensitive areas, you get these people that have the full Manchurian candidate level programming, okay? Now, as monarchs, if they are inducted, because not all of the personnel actually is deemed suitable for this, right? They have a big pool to pull from that they're allowing these situations to happen. Some of these abusive situations, some of these just generational self-replicating situations that are encouraged, enabled, sometimes specifically, specifically directed. But so they will be assigned to territories. And we're not just talking about having some of your guys in judicial, legislative, and executive so you can unite the separation of powers. We're talking about, having people in, each FEMA region. We're talking about having people in each state. We're talking about having a newscaster, a journalist. We're talking about, having your main guy as the guy who all the UAP whistleblowers come to, so you can monitor that channel, and that so he can flag an appropriate party that he's not able to contain, right? We're having all these people assigned, okay? And it's not just a hard territory. We're talking about virtual territories. So just like we know intelligence operations are doing, they have their guys everywhere and covering all the bases. But the important thing to realize is this isn't just their guys. These are mind-controlled guys. And these people don't know that they're mind-controlled. And this is where it's going to get fucked up.
As my buddy Stoley always says, best asset doesn't know they're an asset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And especially when they're young, like you put these people through the paces young. What are you going to do? Like, how early can you really put someone in the field and have them reliable? Have they fucking killed somebody? What if they got to fuck with a gay dude to get to the point? What if they got to fuck with a girl to get to the point and they're not desensitized? What if they see some shit for the first time in the field in action? Like, how are they going to be able to cope with that? You can condition people, and then you can fucking condition people, right? And then also, like, how good can they lie? How these people, they're programmed to where they can be phased in and out of different personalities, to the point where they can pass a lie detector test. Like, you pick up on someone when you're talking to them, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, this motherfucker bad. Like, does this person mean well? Like, look, I talked to him face to face. I know they mean well. Like, there's no chance that he's backdooring this shit. Like, this dude's above board. He might believe he's above board too,
Yeah. If
but
he truly thinks he's not, like, I was telling my buddy this last week, I've done almost 1,700 episodes. I'm like, I have a little bit of a sixth sense where you can just tell. And
oh yeah,
even just simple shit. Like, you can just tell if somebody's getting ready to like sell something, which isn't, I mean, I get it. You're on a podcast, so you want to push a book. It's not like a nefarious thing, but I can kind of sense. I'm like, and it's just fine. If somebody's giving me time out of their day, they're allowed to push their book. That's why I always plug the people's Twitters.
yeah,
But like, that's one thing I always think of is like, yeah, I look back at old episodes of me, and I'm like, the reason why I was saying something so convincingly is because that's what I believed. But
hmm
I've been doing the show for 5 years, so I'm like, I don't believe that anymore. Like, I couldn't fake that now. Now imagine, instead of a temporal difference in 5 years, what if it was something you could turn off in 5 minutes, or someone else could turn off, to where I'm talking to you and you're like, yeah, it didn't seem like Tommy and Gray like knew each other. Like, by by this theory, it's like you and I might actually have like multiple operations under our belts together that are just like dissociated and blacked out. So it's like, no, like, someone might believe what they're telling you. Like, I believe. So when people say, I believe you believe this. So
yes.
sorry, didn't mean to insert myself, but
No,
yeah,
no, exactly. And you can sense if someone has an agenda or something. I mean, if they're a master, there's people who can obviously,
I'm
lie
I'm
to
sure
face
the
the people they
CIA
think.
people I've had on here have completely just skull fucked my sixth sense. So I'm like, I have a
I
sixth
mean,
sense,
how
and
did they get their
they're
job?
like, exactly. I'm like, yeah. I always asterisk, yeah. The CIA people I've had on here, I guarantee you they dance around my sixth sense. But yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of these people that are officially CIA, like that's even a cover in a lot of
yeah,
times.
yeah. It's yeah.
But so here's where it gets really fucked up because, a lot of these people, like, without going into ancient fucking history here and like how things have historically been, which, a cult does tie into intelligence age old, but going just to paperclip, right? So, with all this, they were threshold testing. A lot of this killing and stuff was threshold testing to see the vital limits, how hard they can push different things and stuff like that. When the paperclip scientists came over, that's when we really kicked behavioral modification into high gear.
Hmm.
Now we had like G.H. Esterbrooks, who was a clinical hypnotist that's famous for basically making Manchurian candidates, and he explained one is Jones A and Jones B. They had a Marine intelligence guy, and they gave him a dishonorable discharge and made his primary personality wholeheartedly like believe in red doctrine, right? Like, so he like defected, right, to the Soviets, and like wholeheartedly was in that. But they had his original personality, that was subsurface, and they hypnotically switched this through torture and dissociation and so forth. Obviously, it has to be a suitable element. And that way they could tap into him. It's not just like, hey, you see people see this shit on the movies too, and it's like, you see a spy meet someone and give them a code word. It's not just, oh, the code word, and the person's like, okay, now I know I can talk to this person. That code word might activate something that asset isn't even consciously aware of, and then they spout off some information in a dissociative state that they will not consciously remember. These people are unwitting assets and unwitting spies 99% of the time. Only the very few at the top end up kind of merging that with a process that's called go conscious. But anyways, the point here is, so what they started doing
Because
was
what
with
you
the
just said
paper.
made me think of Mitch Hedberg, comedian, and he goes, "Man," he goes, my favorite drug dealers are UPS drivers because they don't even know they're drug dealers.
Yes. Exactly. An
Yeah,
unwitting courier. Like that
yeah,
that's the best way to do things, because there are tales and so on and so forth that people will fucking pick up on, especially if you have not just your everyday person, if you have people to know what to look for. So, you got the paperclip scientists, they came over. A lot of these people were deep in with the occult, because a lot of these occult practices and even like some of this ritualistic stuff is dark neuroscience. People get all wooed out about this shit, dark neuroscience, and they're manipulating people, hypnotizing them. Someone's under a spell, okay, and then they use a word to activate them. We're talking about sleepers being activated, with clinical hypnosis or stage hypnosis. They have someone that doesn't have their memory, doesn't remember their name. They hear the bell and they cluck like a chicken, right? And
yeah.
this is just serious post-hypnotic suggestions and activations. It doesn't matter, the themed nomenclature doesn't change what it is. So you have these people that are in these societies, coming over from Paperclip, joining up with our guys. The Sovereign Military Order of Malta and a lot of these kind of Jesuit-backed things, they were, they had everybody at the creation of the OSS
Hmm.
into the CIA into the modern day. Like, take Wild Bill,
Wow,
OSS.
Bill
Okay.
Donovan. I read a book on
Yeah.
him last year. He was
Yeah.
legitimately wild. He's
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
crazy.
But, OSS, Sovereign Military Order of Malta, going forward to Oliver North
Hmm.
with the Iran Contra scandal and the NSC, because this is here where we're really getting to the meat of it. He was Sovereign Military Order of Malta. And if you remember, they were using the smuggling, Iran Contra, also associated with the Mena, Arkansas, and that whole, all
Yeah.
that smuggling, that was used as a means to an end to fund black operations and psychological operations, right? Now, what also happened at the hearings for this was that they established that Oliver North and the members of the NSC, that were also Sovereign Military Order of Malta, were instrumental in creating FEMA, which was originally Federal Emergency Military Action. And it was widely criticized that they had spent 12 times the amount of funding on covert operations versus disaster relief. Now, where it gets really messed up is, have you heard of Rex 84 Bravo?
Yeah, yeah. That was what, Reagan?
So Rex 84 Bravo was the military exercises coordinated through FEMA and having to do with this for COG, for continuity of government,
Yeah.
to where all the people that take over were privatized industry and kind of like all their
Yeah.
guys.
That
They
started
had
under, there's a great book I always plug on this show, Raven Rock by Garrett Graff. Yeah,
okay.
no, the continuity of government is like on the surface. I think we all go, yeah, it's the nuclear bunkers, and it's like, yeah, no, it is so like the OCD part of me loves it,
Mhm.
you know. But I mean, it
Yeah.
goes back to Eisenhower. No, like the different czars, like who would take over different sections of the country, do an analysis on like how many days of meat can we get from all of the pet dogs in New York State or
Mhm.
some shit. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
there is like a post US order that is ready to, it's not that they come up with it after the attack starts. The doctrine's there and it's been there for 80 years. If this happens and that happens, this happens, and if Florida gets nuked but California doesn't, and a landslide happens in Arkansas, then consult the chart, and then this happens, and it is mind-boggling.
And on its face, like that sort of thing makes sense because if shit
Sure.
hits the fan, are we not going to have a plan?
No, no,
But
no, no. It, as all most things, it good intentions.
yes, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But you have these same people that are doing this Iran Contra smuggling, right? And all this, setting up Mount Weather, setting up
Yeah.
Cheyenne, setting up
Yeah.
all this in these deep,
Greenbrier, all the shit. Yeah, no, yeah.
yes. And what they were doing was they were storing lists. Rex 84 was drills for continuity of government for mass detainment of citizens that basically would, could be dissidents or could be threats to national security. Thinking about that in current context, some of these national security threats have kind of been deemed like to be your average American citizens
Oh,
where
they
I'm
had
coming
all these things for if nuclear war breaks out or
from.
just a
Hmm.
general breakdown of society. The thing was to preemptively go and arrest all these troublesome people. Not, and you go, well, yeah, like gangbangers. No, 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 not the people in jail. They're already in jail. You don't need to apprehend them. There were people on phases of lists of how much of a problem is that guy going to be when we're not quite at like warlord era, but
Hmm.
we have the National Guard distributing food. That guy, that's a charismatic guy. He's got a following on his podcast. We should probably arrest Tommy and fuck it, get Gray too. Like there are all
Hmm.
these, and you go, okay, in the face of the Cold War, maybe that's an issue. And then you go, well, what is a dissident now? Do you think there are two genders? What do you think about the age of consent? Are you now a national security threat? Well, I don't think kids should have sex with old men. Well, you're now a threat.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a threat.
If you're not with them, you're against them, especially when shit hits the fan, because
Yeah.
that's when things
Yeah.
come to. So Rex 84 was this continuity of government to where they had their people ready to round up citizens and running drills, and the citizens were Rex 84. That's what it was. And the citizen lists are already made. They're made today, but stored. Everything's linked up with giant computers and the deep underground military bases. And again,
Bill Schneider gang.
yeah. So it gets real ugly because you have these same people, again, the Iran Contra smuggling and all this. This is kind of a globalist infestation to where they already had their people, and it's not just Sovereign Military Order of Malta. There's a lot of them similar to that, but these whole globalist programs, the same kind of linked with NATO that ran Operation Gladio. You familiar with Gladio? Stay behind forces.
Yeah.
So what they've been doing worldwide, but we're going to focus domestic here. We're going to focus on the continental U.S. They have generated, industrialized, processed sleeper assets, okay? And the whole main point of this is the stay behind is staying behind within domestic continental US for if shit hits the fan and continuity of government. They were pre-setting up a coup. So if shit hit the fan enough, if the fault line goes, if there's a civil war, if the people from the southern border start bombing the shit, they came through the southern border, start bombing the shit out of us and shit's really hitting the fan, we can activate this force. Some of these people already are in National Guard. Some of these people are already stationed. Some of these people are tier 1 in these top units, but have also went through this certain conditioning, Manchurian candidate level. That is so incredibly sophisticated. They may have no idea that they went through this. Now, the problem is, you have, like I was mentioning earlier, you have your street gangs, you have your middle class, your upper class. So they've been getting assets from all around, and basically, just like, how like intelligence, it's long been known that they control aspects of the drug trade, whether it's cartels, street gangs, this and that. If they don't have their hands in it, like, I understand the justification, because if they don't, that's a missing area to where you could maneuver. You can't leave that unchecked power. Better to have a guy there that's kind of trying to soften it more, like, business versus violence, right, is better for everybody.
And it's always going to exist. And it's not as, sorry to interrupt, it's not as simply as, well, it's money left on the table. That's a cynical way of looking at it, and there's a lot of that. But it's also like these natural power structures you also can't ban milk. So like there will be a dark milk trade. So if this power is happening and it's coalescing, it's better to have people in there, and if not outright controlling it, guiding it.
At least tapped in, because if it's unchecked, like, they're just going to spread these drugs and whatever wherever they want. But if it's checked, we can try to steer some of this towards our enemy, get their people hooked. If there's some area they're going, we can be like, hey, hands off, or it's going to come too. And we can also tap some of them as enforcers. That's plausibly deniable, right? So it's just, there's so many good things to come from it if you're tapped in. So you have, the problem is that the American systems, and especially this black apparatus, is infested with globalist agendas. And they've been building up, all these assets. They've been building up in all areas. And this is all really governed under, clandestine services and, deep human stuff and HCS, human control systems. So, they have tons of people that are in this, and conditions in certain ways can be tapped, some program Manchurian candidate level, some just kind of suggestible to this remote frequency weaponry. And we can utilize that. We can kind of steer the situation, tap in, do what we can with it. Whatever we can do is what we are going to do, So coming up to the 90s, right? In the mid 90s, a lot of this blew. Shit really hit the fan. In Waco. In Waco, it came out. One was when the 160th, right? Task Force 160. Yeah. So it was Task Force 160, and a lot of the like death dealers and all this, and these black operations linked up with like, FBI's HRT squad and all this. A lot of these fucking, whatever you want to call them, a lot of this was hooked up with the same militarized conditioning, to where they were basically doing some of this, not necessarily full-blown Manchurian candidate level stuff, but these same psychological tactics, where showing them videos in different eyes and desensitizing them. And there was a Dr. Naru, Narut, who accidentally spilled classified information in depth about all this, and you can look that up. That kind of goes through the process. It also came out in Waco that they were using some of this remote frequency mind control weaponry, okay, at this whole thing, and that it was involved with an operation. So while all this blew, behind the scenes, there was already whistleblowers, because in this Monarch program, and it's many compartmentalized names, what happened was it was tied in with what's known as the Advisory Committee for Human Radiation Experimentation. That's the ACHRE. That was put into effect by Bill Clinton in 94. I believe it's January 4th, 1994. Okay. 10 days later, okay, or no, this was put into effect the 14th. 10 days earlier, they formed a Special Access Programs Oversight Committee, just while this was blowing, and kind of, again, had layered it off. You had one layer off at the 77 with the Church Committee, and then with this Advisory Committee for Human Radiation Experimentation, you had another layering off in a new committee for overseeing the Special Access Programs. What happened was, at the presidential hearing, there was a dissociative trauma therapist that presented. Her name was Valerie Wolf. When it was told that she was going to be presenting at this in a week and a half, and this was 1995 by then, because they had done the studies. So in a week and a half in 1995, around 40 nationwide trauma therapists contacted her with tons of information from their patients and their colleagues across the nation. And what happened was this was blindly corroborating information, including locations, methods, program names, code words, so on and so forth. And they presented this at the presidential hearing, okay? It was Valerie Wolf, which was the trauma therapist, and then it was two subjects. One was Chris DiNicola, and one was Claudia Molin. Turns out that this operational program that was making behavioral modification Manchurian candidates had several models. We're talking about media models. We're talking about actor models. We're talking about politician models. What was presented at this hearing was two models. They were going by Greek letters. It's similar, right? Going back to, the Mac days, right? Delta, which was like a spy, assassin, espionage. And then you had your beta, which was sex slave honeypot. So there was testimony from two of these mind control victims, Manchurian candidate level, that thoroughly described being put through the paces, one pulled out of a abusive foster home, and then one being pulled out of her father was already within the military, and she was deemed a subject. And they had brainwashed them in research and development to become sex slave, honeypot, and the other spy assassin, right? So you had your delta and beta models. There's a wide variety. In Monarch, the different programming that people get if they actually get pulled up from that base level pool that was enabled. Again, just like the Iran-Contra smuggling was as a means to an end to supply funding to control the networks and supply funding for black budget operations and psychological operations, they had created this widespread child abuse epidemic so they could pull assets as a means to an end. And these two women were brainwashed and described it. And again, then they had handed over, they gave some testimony, and Valerie Wolf gave some testimony, but they handed over documentation from across the nation, from hundreds of patients, subjects, from around 40 trauma therapists, which is where a lot of these people end up. And they, gave over not just corroborating information, but blindly corroborating information, okay? So at that point, it had came out. What also came out was meanwhile, the satanic panic was going on, and everybody's heard of this. Now, forget the fact that, the False Memory Syndrome Foundation was completely infiltrated and funded on CIA personnel and backed money. That's documented fact. But the important part is the 4 existing states that had criminal statutes for ritualized abuse of a child all had legal exemptions for government research projects. Oh. So they had Yes. So they had been doing a lot of this one with the dark neuroscience techniques that's like weird trauma, because that's what's effective, but also for plausible deniability because people were coming out and telling the story of what happened to them. They didn't understand. They just knew they went through some fucking shit, you know? But what was happening was it was also provided cover because it was such a mystical situation. It sounded like bullshit to a lot of people. So they were able to smear that and disprove it by proxy. You know, there's not many reasons for there to be legal exemptions for government research projects, unless if they want to be exempt for said government research projects. Yep.
It's, I mean, sorry. Yeah, so I was one of the things you said earlier, just like the notes was like so just my first thought was like how do I even like kind of begin to understand this or grasp it. It does seem I've had years ago Kent Clisby wrote the book William Accomplices, but he talks about KGB operations. A lot of people know him more like active measures, Yuri Bezmenov, the whole black ops thing, but about how these were self-recreating, self-reproducing programs, and that it was like an idea, and that so you started it by taking over, you know, a movie studio in Hollywood in the 50s, but it became self-sustaining to where everyone involved could die off and there would already be another generation 15 years later through some brand almost like a fraternity forming on campus or something, but it would be more about, you know, the dissolution of the capitalist west or whatever. um and then also about, I always try to think of these things because it, or it's always like another step of just kind of woo woo once you get to psychological, but I always just try to remember it as like clear, not remember it, but compare it as much as you just would like a military program. Be like, okay, well, if this thing existed in the 50s, and then we can see how much, you know, these spy planes advanced from the 60s to the 70s to the 80s, right? That's how a lot of people try to extrapolate about current technology. But so if we knew this was going on in the 80s and like commercial stuff was 50 years behind it, like, you know, you use that as a jumping point to go, so what do you think's possible today? So that's where things come in where it's like, yeah, the UAPs might be government, or it's like we might have a moon base or whatever. Just like if ChatGPT is public now, they probably had this back in like 99. So imagine what they have now. So just as like a mode of extrapolation. So that's what I always try to remember with this stuff is like if we're doing MK Ultra, you know, all this shit, Mockingbird, 40s, 50s, 60s, and if all technology progresses from the alloys on rockets to the fiber optics to the, you know, satellites to whatever, to the
Mhm.
encryption to the Kevlar and vests, whatever. As it all progresses, you have to then go, well, that means it's also progressing with psychological research and weapons. Why wouldn't it? And as with all weapons, there would be kind of mass, kind of dumb bomb, carpet bomb usage, right? And that would be just general, yeah, frequencies in cities or on commercials. And like a laser guided bomb, you would have better ones. And then even more like a Black Ops assassin with a, you know, what's it, caseless ammunition and some silence gun and a, you know, in an ammo size you've never heard of because you can't even drop a bomb. It's like, yeah. So as these things get highly refined for greater and greater targets, because you're right, they're not going to throw $1 trillion MK Ultra program at me. You would do that for the Secretary of Defense. You would do that for the CEO of, you know, fucking whatever, China's largest corporation. So just in general, in terms of like, this is how I try to think of it, in terms of like Cold War history and military technology, and as the progression goes, find something that existed decades ago, see how classified it was, see how far ahead it was from other shit around that time, and extrapolate to now. And then also just, yeah, there would also be different tiers. It's like there would be different things for high value. There's carpet bomb, there's nuke the city, and then there's highly specialized.
Surgical strike.
Why wouldn't it be? And it's and don't think about it as it's good or it's bad or is it, don't get caught up in the emotion. Just think about it rationally. Is this
Math.
what would happen? And as the battlefield changes, It's you could argue. I think I had on Brigadier General Robert Spalding, who was a 1 or 2 star general in the Air Force. He piloted B-2 Spirits, the stealth bombers, like 2 billion a pop. And he talked about it in his book. He was like, it was just wild because like in the morning I would see some like pro whatever Chinese subterfuge. He also had a background in intelligence on my kids whatever TikTok, and we thought we were hot shit because we're getting in a stealth bomber to go fly 10,000 miles. He's like, but they were doing it in your living room. That's the other thing to think about. It's like, as the number of people online, the number of people on phones, the amount of time per day you use on your phone, as that goes up, that would naturally become the battle. You still need aircraft carriers. You still need it for if it goes hot. But right now, the most effective battle space is the internet, is the mind. Why wouldn't you if you don't think the entire full force of the Department of Defense is not behind this shit, just like they were with rockets or the internet or lasers, their job is to kill. It's just what it is. Why wouldn't they own this battle space? So those are just the thoughts I wrote down. But yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, keep going to me to
Oh,
interrupt you.
they'd have to, yeah. And you have your passive and your blanketing, and then you have your surgical direct strikes, right?
Yeah.
And well, like you were saying, they generate something that's self-replicating. Okay, so Monarch with the breeding, you create this environment if they're in media. You have your people there, and like people get to know what's a yes and what's a no. And just like Pavlov, through conditioning over time, if someone doesn't know, they get a fucking zap, they get a fucking smack. And if they do a yes, they get a pat on the back and they get a raise. And it kind of creates that environment over time. People understand how to play ball and they just do to survive. That's a normal human function.
Yeah.
Monarch with the breeding again, the really unfortunate thing about this is the dissociation is hereditary, but also what goes on is trauma, and specifically some of the sexual trauma, is a cycle that people perpetuate, and subconsciously it gets them fucked up. And a lot of abusers grow on to
Mm-hmm.
abuse, even if they mean well. So what really was there, it's not just this direct programming, but there's kind of passive reinforcement that creates a self-replicating machine. And again, even all these compartments, they might not be aware of each other. One hand might not be aware of the other, but they are still working together as more than just the sum of both of them together. They work together and come as a
In a
whole that's more than
synergistic
just the
way,
sum
yeah.
of the parts. So it really gets dangerous. And now, you're getting to this UAP stuff. And, here's one of the things that is very important for people to understand, because at the mid 90s, again, when all this ACHRE came out and all this, it came out that these techniques had been had, and that was all kind of manual hands-on stuff. By then, just like at Waco, they said, oh, we're already testing this remote behavioral modification weaponry, so on and so forth. Well, there was something else that came out called the Stanley Corin helmet. And this was early type of transcranial magnetic stimulation. And what that did was stimulate the temporal lobe, stimulate the Wernicke's area, to do this. And what they could do with that is send pattern messages that were not audible, but they were interpreted, and not necessarily even consciously interpreted, but they would be directly inserted into an actionable part of the subconscious. To get technical, you got your left brain, right brain. Right brain controls left hand. And the way that the brain works is in the left brain, there's something called the interpreter. And that's kind of like how your subconscious synthesizes information and puts things together to make sense. And it's been studied to the point where they can deeply affect that, to where they can zap someone with a pattern message and say, hey, give me a random 10-digit number. And the reason I say this is because actually a 10-digit number is the basis for if someone is, usable, right? And then someone will say, okay, blah, 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 the random 10-digit number with a middle finger saying, what the fuck? And then they'll turn around the screen and say, oh, this 10-digit number that we just fucking sent to your brain. So it was already at that level. Now, for then, it still needed a helmet. Nowadays, They don't even need a helmet. They do need preconditioning, and it needs to be, they need to have full workup with like an fMRI and see like the way the
Hmm.
brain processes information. And, a Manchurian candidate level, they get someone in there with an fMRI, and then they have what's RTMS, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation. They send pattern messages to the brain, and they use micro ECT, and they see with the fMRI, they see where the neuron
Where,
pathways are going and what's happening, and they isolate neural networks,
yeah,
meaning
they're
they
mapping, they're
create
poking it
not
and
not just
going,
one
but
part
yeah,
of the brain, a whole personality,
yeah.
compartmentalized personality,
That
and
comes,
any
that's the
neuron
progression
pathways.
thing. Yeah, sorry,
Yes.
I know I'm interrupting
Oh,
you, sorry, but that's the
exactly.
progression thing, right? Is it not only goes from you don't need a helmet to it's just remote, but it's also if I can poke this and that makes you smell a hot dog, well, that
Hmm.
means that I can make you see a hot dog, think about maybe I can make you think about the whole history of hot dogs. And if it's not hot dogs, what about, I don't know, maybe start being a nefarious actor,
Yeah.
maybe a
And
whole
here's where,
personality.
yeah, and here's where, because I know we need to wrap up here.
No, no,
So,
no. I pushed the second show back 15 minutes so we can. I knew this was gonna happen. I knew I was like,
yeah,
yeah. Whenever I do this, and I try to fit two in a day. The first one always ends up just being a complete banger. I'm like, motherfucker.
yeah, well, yeah. So here's where it gets real fucked up, because so they can do this, and they literally get someone in these fMRIs, and if there's a neuron pathway that connects this compartmented Manchurian candidate, whether it be a beta, whether it be a delta, whether it just be a fucking compartment that has this classified information, and they're a courier, right, an unwitting spy. If a neuron pathway is stray and is kind of connecting that to where they're consciously will be aware, they burn it out with ECT, and they create completely compartmentalized elements that just that someone does not have conscious memory to. But they also create fail safes. This is mandatory. Anybody that has this level of programming before the actual programming is put in and they get the serious knowledge, they lay what's called base programming down. This is mandatory, and people always will start with base programming. Otherwise, they will not progress. It's a sterile protocol. You don't proceed to step 2 unless if step 1 is completed. This is, sterile protocol, only in place if it can go according to this. That is true operational security. What happens is, and we will take, for example, this Cybertruck bomb
Hmm.
situation that happened, right? For an example. Okay. Anybody that is pulled into these programs and is operational, they will have more than passive conditioning. They will have the base programming in place, which includes what's called gamma and omega. And let me explain. These are the two to explain real quick, because this is what obfuscates in all whistleblowers. This is the UAP. And the reason I'm focused on this is because it's such a hot topic. But you see these front facing personnel that had a background as a tier 1 unit, whether it be an ISA, whether it be in what, completely unwitting. One, they go to the head doctor. If they ever like are experiencing something, or even if they're missing time, they're not fucking telling anybody. That's how you get your
Right.
gun taken. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
yeah, yeah. And they want
So,
to play. Yeah,
and they want to play, exactly. And especially if they believe in what they're doing and feel good about it, like, I'm all fucking in, fuck this little stuff, I'm tunnel vision, eyes on the prize.
yeah.
So what happens is there's layered fail safes. Say I'm the UAP guy, pretend, okay, I need to whistleblow one, there was some blue on blue that was getting covered up routinely to an extent that's not serving national security, but like buried as fucked. And then 2 is, okay, I see this advanced technology and like it's being used for a bad purpose. So what happens, the first failsafe is called gamma programming. And gamma programming is deception, okay? And what this does is this will confuse testimony. What might happen is, again, this stuff's layered in deep. The temporal lobe will be stimulated so it feels significant. It feels, so important, and like, you accept it, and it can create vivid imagery. But with a patterned message, basically, it will embed a post-hypnotic suggestion that say, hey, if you start disclosing unauthorized about this UAP program, we'll just keep it simple, the UAP program, it will kick in and they will automatically have a vision. Okay. And it might not be a vision. They might start hearing voices. They might start thinking about something strong because they had this magnetic pattern shot to them, and it will confuse their disclosure. They may start talking about some throwed shit. They might start talking about way on the deep end of aliens. They might just start talking, focusing on like some problems in their own life, something to discredit them. Okay. The whole point of it is to discredit them. So you see, this guy started disclosing and reaching out to people, but then some of the story came out and took some turns from what he was originally talking about. Okay. Now, if they are getting to the point where they're actually whistleblowing and it's going to the next part and there's all this fucked up shit going, but say if they're still saying, hey, this happened here and this is the name of the program that's there, and still the real information is getting out, if they're not able to contain that, if they can't derail and destabilize the person through gamma programming, if they can't discredit them to outside sources, if the gamma programming is failing, then what kicks in is omega programming. And omega programming is suicide programming, where they kill themselves. And I want you to know that this is the number one way that they burn people out in these, especially in these tier 1 units. If they become disillusioned and start fighting against this and they can't be contained, whether through gamma or other means, whether, they weigh on them with a SF312, their NDAs, and they say, hey, this is methods, of conditioning. This is, whatever it is. If they can't contain them, it goes to omega. And it's not just like, people aren't just like, okay, there's 2 ways omega's done. One is they will make a rush of horrible feelings that are personally significant, and this is embedded with what's called Ericksonian style scripts, hypnosis. Ericksonian hypnosis scripts are basically ones that they use, that the subject helps create, that go along with their psyche. You don't try to go against the grain. You don't want to force something. You take everything from their life. You will know their personal details already if they're high up in something, and know, if they have family problems, their childhood history, what really their wants and desires are, what their problems and fears are. It will expound on what's available and flood someone with synthetic emotions of just horrible, horrible angst and all the bad feelings, and it will flood them with this post-hypnotically, automatically going off if these unauthorized disclosures are coming, and make these people want to kill themselves. Then these people won't say, oh, my programming's going off. They will just get caught up in the moment of a sudden rush of feelings. And since some of this builds on, expounds on what's already involved with them, they will project it. And a flashback feels like now, you relive it. But the flashback of just the emotion, like from the helmet, you will project that onto your current life and your current situation. Like, fuck, man, I'm going against this. Everybody I worked with, fucking, this isn't going to do anything anyways. And I'm just a burden. And, it can really instigate someone to kill themselves, unfortunately. There's layered. The second aspect of this is they get people in somnambulistic hypnosis through the aid of drugs and through this transcranial magnetic stimulation while they're stimulating the parts of the brain to accept it. And they program people's sleep cycle. Somnambulism is N3 sleep cycle. If someone sleepwalks, that is somnambulism. Sleepwalking is somnambulism. So they get someone in a somnambulistic state, the N3 sleep cycle, and will program this to kill themselves, and that is robotic sleepwalking mode. And what I truly do believe, based on intelligence that I have been given and just knowing my way around this scene as well as other experts in the field, that is exactly what happened to that man and so many more. It is stereotypical. Like, this was created and implemented under national security to prevent unauthorized disclosure of information, right? And theoretically, even though it's horrible stuff, like, okay, perhaps it could be justified.
It's fucked, but like abstractly, you
right,
get
you
where
can't
they're
hand
coming
over our
from.
nuclear secrets to our nuclear level secrets to the enemy. But when it's being used to prevent disclosure of crimes against humanity and corrupted oversight, when it's being misused and the personnel are being misused and the people that are running these black ops are actually, or sensitive programs are actually being used for corrupt agendas, that is illegitimate. There is no national security context, and it needs to be exposed. And there are so many people that have fallen victim to Omega closeout. It's reclamation or closeout. They either reclaim the person once they start going, once they're scrambled, and then can contain them, suppress them, or otherwise neutralize them, or it moves on to closeout. And closeout will either be full-blown Havana syndrome, electronic dissolution of memory, where they fry it out of their brain and the people are left with a traumatic brain injury, or Omega, which is worst case closeout, where they are suicided.
And it makes, again, it's completely fucked. but it makes sense in the same way it's like the SR-71 Blackbird, and one of the requirements aside from being like the best of the best was you had to have a wife and kids, and like the popular theme is like, well, it showed maturity, and no, it wasn't. What it meant was you're
Never
in one of the
true.
most valuable assets on the planet. You're probably not going to go land that in the Soviet Union if your wife and baby boy are back here in this guarded compound. Are you really
Makes
going to go
sense.
do that? Are you really going
Make,
to go? You like your son? And if you don't think they're not fucking around, they're not fucking
no, they're
around.
not.
And in the same way, I just was reading a book on SpaceX and shit. But yeah, I mean, even just remote detonation switches on rockets. You can have a $1 billion rocket, but if it starts to fuck up and a booster goes out and it starts going back over land, and it's like, yeah, man, that has the force of a small like atomic bomb. And well, what if a nefarious actor hijacked it? You have to have a thing that's essentially just like C4 next to a fuel tank, and you hit the remote because if you're gonna have a super powerful, super asymmetric weapon, that weapon can be turned on you. So you want to be
Mhm.
able to put it down. It doesn't make it right,
Exactly.
but
Fight the
you have
capsule.
to understand why wouldn't they do this? If you have some guy that's fucking Delta Force, ground branch, yeah, intelligence support, just like knows about the bleeding edge, knows where to get, different black networks of weapon caches and shit. You don't want that guy becoming a fucking commie, or and I get
Don't
it
want
gets
the weapon
abused
turned
is it's
against you.
yeah, it's the theory is it's like, well, that's how we defend against the Cold War, but then it always ends up, as all these things are, they end up getting hijacked for personal reasons. But it does makes sense. And it makes let me just I'll put it out there. It makes sense that a serial killer, I don't know, dissolves the body so there's no evidence. I'm not supporting it. I'm just saying I
Yeah.
get it. I get it. And it's
So,
fuck.
so to close this out,
Jesus.
talking about making sense, going back, you read Spies for Hire,
Yeah.
okay? And this goes into Abraxas. So here's the thing: is Cubic, which is a leader. Cubic is known for P5, which is the training system for F-35s, right? Like all the way up there.
Yeah.
So Cubic is a foremost of advanced learning solutions and game-based learning. They actually help develop the platform that's used in modern shooters now through with DARPA, right? So a lot of that first-person shooters, right, actually comes from old military technology. But so Cubic is known to be involved with these gifted and talented education programs, these STEM programs through DARPA's Engage program. So it is on the records that they were using these military game-based learning platforms that even have like training platforms for every single MOS, right? Like, and they were putting kids through these and using them to develop them, right, for military, right? So adolescence, right? Cubic is being used on adolescents on the books, in schools through DARPA's Engage. But then what is Cubic? Who does Cubic own? Cubic owns Abraxas, who has the OGs who craft the non-official covers for sensitive operatives and programs. So the same umbrella, the same company that is using game-based learning to train young kids also is tied up with the same ones that are creating knock covers, okay, for long-term use, all in the same wheelhouse. So if you look at that with these clandestine grooming programs, you can see how they could train an unwitting child to have non-official cover and be a sleeper unwitting to them and route them accordingly. And that's exactly what is happening at the hands of corrupt oversight serving globalist agendas that are tied up with some of these globalist orders.
Yeah, it's episodes like these where I get it gets so far into it. I'm like, how do I just I'm literally just like I just stay away from me, Satan. Like I don't know how else to go about it. But I do
Oh
think
yeah.
about that, and because it's when you look at something like this and you go, this is so vast and it's such an advanced enemy. You have to be very realistic. I go, I know I'm not going to individually beat it. I'm not a black pill. I'm humble enough to go, like, yeah, I'm probably not going to beat LeBron James one on one. But
Mhm.
you do have to remember it's I saw some meme, wasn't really meme, but I really liked it. And it was like you can work hard, but you can't outwork Satan because he doesn't sleep. You know, you can have goals, but like you can't outgoal Satan because he is hyper fixated on power. Like you can be tough, you can be cutthroat, but you can't out cutthroat Satan because he's fucking Satan. It's like,
Right.
but what you can do is you can ask God for humility because that is what Satan is unable and unwilling to do. And I think about that and I go, yeah, we don't have we're not being given a trillion dollars in the backing of a bunch of Fortune 500 companies to, create psychological warfare techniques that seem alien. I get that. But what you can do is you can get close to God and you can be like, hey, well, what's the best possible thing I can do to push back against this? And that's what you have to do because it is, yes, it's a seemingly unwinnable fight. But I think the worst outcome ever would be to surrender and not do even what little we can do. I think it'd be awful to not do that little. So it's, you only have one bucket of water to throw on a fire. It's like, yeah, but it's better than not doing anything. And so when you get into this stuff, and I'm now more just thinking aloud, it can seem so overwhelming. You're like, what is even the point? You're like, well, you're not here by accident. God gave you free will, but he didn't abandon you. He didn't throw you here and say, well, you're fucked. You're here for a reason. And it means that you got to do what you can do. So even if it's just talking about this stuff, or even if it's just, praying to God for humility. And there is also something kind of hardcore about like looking in the face of all of this and being like, yeah, I'm still not going to join them. They're fucking demons and they fuck kids. There is something kind of cool about
Exactly.
being like,
Never surrender.
yeah, like, what, you join the tidal wave. You're like, no, it's gay. It's faking
There
gay.
is there is one thing, if I may,
Yeah.
and this is how we've been combating it, and this is a huge thing, and this is why I've went public again, because I whistle blew about these programs in 2014 after being falsely fucking imprisoned over
Yeah.
coming out of this. Now, just like I explained at the 1995 ACHRE, where they gave the blindly corroborating information, I am linked up with a group of people from this. I'm the only one that's went public, which is why I present it. But we have started a foundation called Organized Safety, and that's organizedsafety.org. I left with a database of some of these off-list assets and some of these program names, locations, and corrupt personnel, and many other people have too. This was inspired, based, and expounding upon the work of Valerie Wolf at that committee. And what we have is organizedsafety.org, to where people that were involved with this, people that want to have a data dump, people that want to give suspicious activity reports, whether it be Epstein level stuff, whether it be this brainwashing, and the Epstein rings are tied in with this. A lot of the perpetration is actually trauma bonding future assets to their handlers. That's not all the VIPs are just getting their rocks off. But so what we did was we created this system. It is now public at organizedsafety.org, and it is end-to-end encrypted, and you can anonymously leave tips. If you want to leave an email, we recommend you make a brand new Proton mail and don't lose it. And you can grant allowance, you can grant permission for notification if your information is corroborated. So if 10 people have submitted the same name, whether it be a program name, whether it be a location, whether it be a perpetrator, and that gets flagged in our database, we will have a liaison contact people and talk about getting together, okay? And what happens is it's building up blind preponderance of evidence for civil law, and it is building up burden of proof for criminal law. And meanwhile, with certain banks of information and blindly corroborating, we have been presenting that behind the scenes, including to, staffers and, bureaucrats at SSCI, Armed Forces Committees, so on and so forth. Those are the two that I've showed publicly. We've notified tons of people, and tons of people are aware of how big of a thing this is. And there's a heavy push by a lot of people, because right now this is getting transferred over to technology that is so frighteningly undetectable and effective that it's kind of like we're in this transitional window to where before this full technology rollout, it needs to happen now. So I urge anybody with evidence of this sort of activity or involvement with this sort of activity, organizedsafety.org. It's the lowest impact, safest way available to report and build up blindly corroborating information. Don't, ask yourself why that sort of smart system is not implemented elsewhere. Is it by design? Thank you.
Mm, that was awesome. We got to wrap it up because I have another guest. But dude, uh, text me that. Put the organized safety just as a reminder. I'll put it in the description. And I'd absolutely love to have you on again sometime, man. That was fucking fun as shit. That was brilliant. That was
I
awesome.
appreciate you, man, greatly.
Fuck yeah, dude. And yeah, guys, it doesn't mean it's not scary. It doesn't mean that they're not demons from hell with limitless resources, but find Christ. We're gonna win. We always will. And yeah, they wouldn't have to do all this shit if it was already over. They have to do all
They're
this shit.
fucked. It just
They're
ain't happened yet.
fucked. This
They're
just
fucked.
not yet. From
They're
God's point of
fucked.
view, people always go, God wins in the end. I go, there is no God's already won. It's not that God wins in the end. From where God, there is no time. It's already over. We're just subjectively experiencing it. So yeah, fuck these faggot demons. We won.
Oh, we're going for the head, break the
We're going
cycle.
for the head. We're
Organized
gonna
safety.
fucking put it on a streak. Fuck you. All right, brother.
I
Appreciate your
appreciate you, man.
time. Yeah,
Have a good
man.
one.
Text me that link. I'll put it in the description and we'll schedule another one. All right.
Yes,
All
sir.
right,
Take
brother.
care.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.